I mean, storytelling really is what made the world and, brought cultures together or separated them. Sure.
It is the ultimate data repository, really. If you can create stories that resonate and vibrate, those stories will outlast civilizations, and they have.
Sometimes you need a good story to sell a white-handled mug.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah,
let's call a spade a spade.
There's a lot more to that story.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence.
Alex, man, thank you for coming on. I've been really excited for this one. I know I say that for all my guests because I just have the best guests that are coming on. But as we were talking today and thinking over the last couple of days, I mean, you and I met 19 years ago, both a couple of young guys in this industry. I was at a previous company on a co-op, and you and I sort of hit it off early on, and you were always someone that was a couple years ahead in the industry, a mentor in many ways, a resource, and we've kept in touch ever since. And I get made fun of all the time by everyone at Brand Boulevard. They're like, "You actually have a man crush on Alex." I'm like, yeah, I do. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that.
The feeling's mutual, Chris. And yeah, it has been a long time, hasn't it? It's incredible. I recall meeting you. I recall the heart that you had and that you have today. And I'm equally as excited to be on this podcast with you today. I've been thinking about it for a couple of months since you invited me on the podcast. And I guess the subconscious has been running through all the different scenarios and the different topics we would talk about. So I'm curious to find out where we're going to go today. But Chris, it's always been your heart. It's always been your enthusiasm and your curiosity that has captured my imagination and really drawn me to you. You have a magnetism about you that that has solidified our friendship over these years. And I know that we don't see one another all the time, but I feel that whenever I see you, it's time that's meaningfully spent, and I really respect that, and just it feels really good to be connected with you.
Love it, man. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you, and I appreciate it. And again, it's we can go months without talking or seeing each other, and we just pick up where we left off. And I think the one thing I appreciate the most while we're in a man love chat here is just we can get vulnerable quick and just get to the hey, let's talk about real. Let's let the walls down. And I just value that so much. So
yeah, me too. Let's do it, man.
Love it. Let's go.
All
okay,
right.
So, I got these notes, but we're gonna go where it's gonna go. The part that I think is most important for people that don't know you is tell us about give us a context to your background. What was life growing up? Where did you grow up? And share a little bit of that with us.
Sure. I grew up in British Columbia. Born and raised in Vancouver, and then I kind of grew up in Richmond, which is a suburb of Vancouver, just outside of it. And Chris, I probably would have told this story a little bit differently 2 months ago. So it's interesting that there's a fluidity to truth. And you're asking me about my past. How did you grow up? What did it look like? What did it feel like? And 2 months ago, I would have had a story that had a continuum to it. And that story I would have been able to tell to everybody. This is how I grew up. This is how it felt. This is what it looked like. And 2 months ago, my brother came to visit. And we're really close. We're best friends.
Older, younger?
Younger brother by 2 years. So we're pretty close in age. We grew up playing sports together, going to the same school together, having the same friends on the same street together. And my brother shared some information about our family that I wasn't aware of. And so it changes my entire perception of growing up. So it's actually more of a complicated question. And so I'm going to answer that question for you. And I'm going to give you the point of view from when I was younger and what it felt like growing up, if that makes any sense. And then I'm going to step outside of that perspective, and I'm going to give you some additional context that changes the way I feel about my past. Does that sound fair?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. So I think, and I felt I'm 49 years old, I felt for 48 years that I grew up as a normal dude, growing up in a normal society. That is, I had parents, they didn't separate, they didn't get divorced. I have a brother and a sister that I grew up with. I went to regular school just like everybody else did.
Yeah.
I went to French immersion because my dad was French, and that was important to have us be able to speak the language and enjoy the culture. And I played a ton of sports, and I loved every single one of them. And I immersed myself in academics as well. So I enjoyed school. I enjoyed a lot of the subjects. I enjoyed the friends I had. And then I got into the arts. And I enjoyed the arts tremendously, being in plays and operas and expanding that artistic world of which I was exploring. And my life just progressed in a beautiful way that if you looked at it on a map, probably looked like that as I grew and learned and assimilated that knowledge and turned into a young man and eventually a man. And I guess that took me to university. I went to UBC, and in my second year at university, my dad passed away suddenly at the age of 49, and he appeared to be quite fit. We always thought he was, and there's no reason to believe that he wasn't. He was still fairly athletic and looked very normal, not obese, not anything like that, but he had a history of heart attacks in the family. And his entire side of the family seems to pass away from heart attacks. And at the age of 49, he passed away from a heart attack on December the 29th. And it was a defining moment in my life. But it was only defining in the sense that I lost that physical connection to my dad. He was no longer there. But it didn't change anything about how beautiful I felt my life always was and how awesome my life was. I felt lucky. I felt just like I was living life, and it was simple, and it was gorgeous, and it was adventurous, and I was able to satisfy my curiosity. But having my dad pass away, left a little bit of a hole for me, but not to the extent that it derailed anything for me at all. I continued to go to university. I continued to embark in relationships and have girlfriends and have a beautiful family life. And then I met a girl in university who became my wife. And of course, we were living in Vancouver. We moved to Ontario after we both finished our degrees because she wanted to be a teacher, missed her family. And the second act of my life started here in Ontario, Chris. So the first part of my life, I always say, it was so normal. It felt great. I'm really happy. I'm really lucky. Let me step out of that perspective now, give you a different perspective. So a couple of months ago, my brother revealed to me some of the things I wasn't aware of about my dad. I wasn't aware that he had a different type of relationship with my brother. And it was more of a tumultuous relationship. I
Really?
Never had that. My dad was supportive. He wasn't the most communicative person. He wasn't the most talkative person.
Typical of that generation.
But he was always there, Chris. He was there at practices, occasionally coached my teams, supported me, I felt, from a heart perspective. And yet my brother recounts this story of times of physical abuse. And they're not plenty, but they existed to the extent that they influenced my brother. They influenced his worldview. And,
oh my gosh,
and
yeah.
so in hearing this, as much as I love my brother, it hurts, right? So it hurts to understand that someone you love had a much more difficult time than I had. And so now I step back with this new context and I see my life a little bit differently. It doesn't change the fact that I felt one way about my life, but I have a broader understanding that there were more things going on than I was aware of. And I think that's a theme that has repeated itself in my life, that you're only as good as your level of awareness. You're only able to work to your level of awareness, to be aware of things that are in that field of awareness. But once that field of awareness expands, you're in new territory. And there are all kinds of interesting ramifications that can be sad and happy and all the emotions in the spectrum. So I could keep on going, and I could talk to you about Act 2 throughout, my early years in Ontario. But I'll stop there because I think it gives you a little bit of perspective in terms of what formulated my worldview and how that worldview has changed in the last 60 days. It's crazy, isn't it?
That's incredible. That's heavy information to hear. What was the emotional response when you heard that? Was it defending either party? Did you have obviously a different viewpoint on both your brother and your father, but what resonated with you there?
Well, it did a lot of things. It caused me to reflect for several days consecutively in deep thought, replaying that conversation. And more than replaying the conversation, tuning into the emotions that my brother was presenting and that I was receiving with. And that allowed me to expand my awareness. And what immediately occurred to me was that on a deeper level, probably at a subconscious level, I may have been aware that there was more to the picture. And I'll give you a concrete example. I'm a guy who's made a lot of mistakes in my life. And I sometimes dwell on those mistakes. And I ask myself, what caused that mistake? Why did I make that choice? And I accept full responsibility for every mistake I've made. And yet I know that because of the nature of my belief in how connected everything on the planet is, there's more than just me as a variable that's responsible for all of the happenings in my life. And so that's a roundabout way of saying that intuitively, I had a hunch that there was more going on in my family life than I was ever aware of. And my brother revealed other interesting things about my dad or our dad that were aha moments for me that began to answer questions that I had been asking for the last 3 years. Why did I make that decision? Why did I do that? Why did I act that way? And it was enlightening. It was all at once beautiful and an awakening to be able to have a deeper understanding of who I am as a soul and as a construct, because I think those two things exist at the same time. So I had a lot of feelings, Chris, and in addition to that, forgiveness was a snap. I couldn't have received that information several years ago. I was not in a place that would have allowed me to process it, integrate it, and use it in beautiful ways. But today I am. And 60 days ago, I certainly was able to accept that information. And so forgiveness came to mind instantly. I see, Dad. I see. Jeremy, he's my brother. Jeremy, I see, I understand. These aha moments that allow you to exhale and go, fuck, oh my gosh, I see. And I just keep on repeating that here in this interview right now, and it's really a symbol for clarity. I have clarity, more clarity than I had before. And so this is the result of a conversation like that happened 60 days ago.
Why now for him to bring that up?
I asked the questions. I was not afraid to ask the questions. So I asked him because I'd had an inkling a year, 2, 3 years ago, just in conversation, that his relationship with our dad was different than mine. And I guess at the time, like so many other things in my life, I put the blinders on. And I'm like, yeah, I'm focused on this, and I'm not focused on that.
Sure.
And so in this particular moment, I was ready to receive the answer. And I asked. And I'm not a guy who studies the Bible, though I've read it, but I think there's something about asking, ye shall receive. And I asked the question, and I got the answer. And what I've discovered, Chris, that's somewhat related to this, is that that tenet holds true really no matter where you go. Ask and you'll get the answer to your question. And it might not be direct, but you'll get it in a roundabout way eventually. And that happened to me on that day.
I really appreciate you sharing that. A couple things that jump out to me there is the lack of judgment on self and others there, to be able to kind of be open to be like, hey, I get it, Dad. I get your side. Jeremy, I get your side, and I get my piece of that too, because I think it's easy to say, I wish I did that. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, and to go back and say, shit, I wish I did that 10 years ago, or why didn't I think of that? But, in all reality is we do the best with what we can at any given time, and to go back and say, hey, that was a part of my life and made me who I am, and to be able to do that without judgment, I think is so friggin' important when we look back at those things. And the other thing that came to mind is, every family has their own version of trauma, and I think all different ways. Years ago, I had a very similar story. Our family was perfect, great, this, and and then all of a sudden it's conversations with my parents, with siblings, extended family, or people not in my family. My parents lost a 3-year-old on an accident. On our farm, and like the trauma that caused, and really I was able to go back and say, like, wow, I can't believe they had courage to have kids again. I can't believe, it makes sense why my mom and dad did this or didn't do that. Like, holy crap, they were doing the best they could. So I think just the understanding that probably later in life more people have that appreciation for. But to your point, I think you have to be ready and open to see the other side without judgment.
Yeah. What a fascinating story. What a fascinating discovery. And I have to think that, as you pointed out, your parents would have raised you with the fear of losing another child, and they would have made decisions that were based on that reality, and they would have been loving decisions that came from their hearts, and perhaps they would have been difficult for you at the time or at different times in your life.
Absolutely.
But isn't that fascinating? Just that awareness and those aha moments. Wow, holy smokes. And it really is a lesson in humility, isn't it? Because what it teaches me is that there's always additional levels of awareness. There is an infinite distance to travel when it comes to awareness. And so the humility comes from the knowledge that I know what I know today, and I feel what I feel today, but there's much more to discover. And there's a good chance that I'm wrong about what I feel today or what I think today, even though I don't necessarily believe in the concept of right or wrong. But there, with that knowledge of infinite awareness comes humility. And I relish humility these days. I find it a beautiful place to sit. I find it a beautiful place from which to create, from which to be honest, from which to open your heart, that zone of humility.
Yeah, I love it, man. Let's go back to a lengthy career and very successful career you had in the promotional products, branded merchandise, whatever you want to call it, space, which is, again, how we met. What were some of the highlights along the way for you?
I had so many highlights.
20 plus years.
Yeah, meeting my wife in the industry was the biggest highlight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sarah's a gem. We love her.
It brings tears to my eyes and makes me extremely emotional to think about that. Other highlights include positively influencing people, sharing my energy with people, having the space to be creative and exercise creativity. And also, I think that I'm grateful for the challenges that I incurred along the way as well that have shaped who I am today. So every day you could probably turn into a highlight reel. Just before we started this interview, you were talking to me about the ups and downs in life. And we resolved that even in the span of an hour, are these micro ups and downs.
Sure.
And if you break down a minute, there are micro ups and downs,
How
right?
fast it can change too, right?
Yeah, so I'd like to say that you could create a highlight reel every day for those 20 plus years that I was in the industry.
It's awesome. Most challenging moment of your career?
There's a lot of open air here. There's a lot of space here because there isn't a single most challenging moment in my career. There's a culmination of deceit and dishonesty that permeates my career that that make me feel shitty about certain moments in my career. And that represents the biggest macro challenge of my career. So to share what that is, I was unfaithful to my wife for many years. And that unfaithfulness, to me, tainted a 20-year career. It doesn't diminish the beautiful things I did and the joy I brought and the heart I brought and the love I brought to the industry and my colleagues and my peers, and it doesn't diminish any of that. But for me, in my heart, it's problematic. It's challenging. It's something that I'm still working through, and I think that what it did, and I apologize to everybody in the industry that I was connected to, that I could never give 100% of my heart. And I think that I gave 90% of it at all times, but my energy, some of my energy was focused on the deceit that I was engineering in my life at the time. And so that really signifies the challenge that I felt in the industry. Because apart from that, Chris, nothing was an insurmountable challenge. That one was. That one hit me in the heart. And we can expand on that later as we, chronologically go through the timeline of my life. But I encountered other challenges at work. I quit twice. And those were challenging moments, but they weren't insurmountable. And
why did you quit?
I felt disrespected in both instances, and I wasn't going to stand for it, and so I quit. And both times I was brought back into the industry by my mentor, and I don't fault him for that. I understand why he did it, and I guess in some way, shape, or form, it was where I was supposed to be. And so I re-entered the industry, in some instances a matter of hours after I quit, and in another instance a day or two after I quit. But those were challenging moments, but again, they weren't insurmountable. I recognized the truth in the matter, that I was being disrespected, and I just said, no, I'm not going to be disrespected. The irony of it is that I was disrespecting my wife the entire time, and so I guess really in hindsight and where I'm at today, I understand that I was being disrespected. What you give is what you get, and what I was giving was what I was getting. So I would like to say today, it's fair. It's totally fair. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the disrespect. I'm okay with everything that happened in my 20-year career, good, bad, ugly. It really is a part of me. It's a part of my fabric. And from time to time, I enjoy visiting the past. I enjoy relishing certain moments that were monumental and beautiful and a source of tremendous pride and love and joy. And I even appreciate going back to the moments where I was deceitful and feeling the pain, the tremendous pain that I inflicted on the people I love and on myself. And I think that's important. I said this the other day to someone I love in my family, that we forgive, but we don't forget. And the forgiveness component, pardon me, is so unbelievably beautiful. And I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm sure your listeners are aware of this. And if you're not, if you wholeheartedly open your heart and forgive, the freedom that exists is unquantifiable. It is unquantifiable. You end up being somewhere in some place that is so rich in love that it fills every single pore of you. And so I appreciate going back to those moments, as challenging as they are, to feel that, and then to feel the pain that comes with that. The pain that I inflicted, the pain that I created, all of those things. That is life. That is the complete view of life. So many people are striving for happiness. What do you want in life? You'll ask somebody. Well, I want to make a ton of money. I want to be super happy. I want to live in bliss. I want to live in ease. And I love those goals. I love those aspirations. But what I've discovered, and this might not be true for everybody, is that there is a 360-degree spectrum of every emotion you could possibly ever encounter, and they all exist simultaneously. And to feel the depths of love is to feel the depths of pain. And they coexist in such a beautiful way that it's remarkable. It's remarkable. It's just, I sit here right now and bask in the beauty and the pain that exists in this particular moment.
Wow. I appreciate how deep you went on that and how vulnerable you were. Thank you. Here's my ask is, you're one of very few people in my life that I would describe as the ability to, the emotional awareness and experience to let all good, bads, high, lows, every single emotion come through, appreciate, and let go. And from experience, my journey is still working through. And I think a lot of people are probably looking, can hear someone like you or many experts in the field and say, that's great, Alex, but I'm so fucking pissed off at this person in my life, or I can't forgive them for what they did. Where does someone start on a journey to feel more love, to find forgiveness, to start on this healing path? Because I think I'm a believer that everyone is carrying trauma and unable to truly, let go of certain feelings and emotions that override a lot of times their life and cause bad habits and substance abuse, whatever these things are that distract us from those feelings, the highs or the lows. So where do you start?
We talked a little bit about awareness earlier and this unlimited field of awareness that exists. And I think that the key is in awareness. So, my journey exploring my emotional reality really begins 3+ years ago. I suppose one could say it began at birth or even before birth. I'm sure that's true. But the awakening and the ability to be able to feel the degree to which I feel today began about 3 years ago. And so my answer to you is that it is okay to be pissed off with somebody. It is okay to be angry and upset or jealous or mad or in love or whatever emotion you feel. But what I would say to you is acknowledge the emotion. Let's use being pissed off for a moment. Acknowledge being pissed off. And instead of dismissing it, like I was so used to doing, dismissing the things that didn't resonate with the way I wanted to feel, instead, because it's a prevalent emotion, because it's something I feel so acutely at this moment, it's an indication that this is something I need to study. And you, of all the people I know, you are somebody who is innately curious. This is something I've always known about you and respected about you, is your curiosity. And so I would encourage you and everyone who's listening to be curious about the way you feel, because the way you feel is a language unto itself. It's a reality unto itself. It is a dimension. And I think that so many of us, particularly men, guys in this society, we're conditioned to not be open to our emotions.
Sure, push it down.
Yeah, right?
Suppress, not
and
talk
just
about it.
shoot through. What's the goal? I'm going for the goal. And so become aware of what you're feeling and examine that bit by bit, minute by minute, hour by hour. Don't be afraid to have alone time and to meditate on the subject of how pissed off you are. I would ask myself, why am I pissed off? Why do I feel the way I feel? Where's the window to forgiveness? Is there a window? Under what circumstances would there be a window? I would just begin by asking a myriad of questions until one of them resonates. One single question. And it's like creating a business. You create a business and you have all of these ideas. The world is your oyster. I can create any business I want right now, anything under the sun. And I examine this and I examine that and I examine that. And then at some point you're like, ooh, that one there, I got a feel for that one. And so in asking the questions about why we're so pissed off, one of them invariably is going to make you feel something. And then examine that question and follow it in a meditative state. And when I say meditative, I mean in a focused state.
An aware state.
In aware state, yeah. Free of encumbrances, free of distractions, free of your phone ringing and your family yelling and the traffic buzzing by. Just take the time to quiet down and get in touch with why you're so darn pissed off. And the answer is right there. And the answer may not appear to you in words and language, but you'll feel it and you'll know intuitively that you're on to something and there's a thread you can follow. And the more you follow that thread, the more you're going to realize that it leads to something, a mass of threads, a rope. I got something that I can hang on to now. And then eventually handles. These are really easy to hang on to. And then eventually you begin to see very clearly, you begin to see what it is that's pissing you off. And my pro tip for you is that what's pissing you off is generally something that's inside you. It's you that's pissed off. You're pissed off at yourself. You're not pissed off at somebody else. So this is the reality that I've discovered when it comes to examining one's emotions. And I don't profess to be an expert at it by any stretch of the imagination. I've just become good at it because there's lots of areas in my life that I still need to explore and look at and feel the emotions out. But I can tell you, Chris, that at this particular moment in time, I am happier than I've ever been. I'm more fulfilled than I've ever been. I feel more successful than I've ever been. I feel healthier than I've ever been. I feel the best I have ever felt in my entire life at this moment, right now, knowing what I've learned, what I'm integrating, the wisdom that I'm acquiring, and also knowing how incomplete I am and how flawed I am at the same time. I feel unbelievable. And I think that everyone has the ability to feel that too, in spite of their angers, in spite of their frustrations, in spite of their heartbreak, or whatever emotion it is that they happen to be feeling.
My big takeaway from that is and knowing you and knowing the time put in is that it's a long-term journey of no different than working out or eating healthy. It's a commitment to put the time in. I think that's where a lot of people lose track. And self-admittedly, there's a lot of excuses around in my world with young boys or whatever it is, to young kids. But it is to expect the results without that time and continued effort to put in, I think is very challenging to do. The other thing that resonated is
can I throw a spin into that?
Go.
I want to throw a spin into that. The spin is that, contrary to what you just said, the ability exists to change overnight. It exists. I know it's there. I can do it. And that may sound really arrogant at this moment. What? You could fix yourself? You could just hit that switch and do it? And the answer is yes, it could, Chris. And I know that to be the case. Why do I know that? As I feel it in my heart, 100%. But why won't I do that? Or why am I not going to do that at this moment? Because I'm here for the journey. I'm here for the experience. I love the experience. I love everything I'm going through right now. Painful, beautiful. So let's move that concept from the ability to work on oneself to the ability to forgive or the ability to heal. All of these things are possible instantaneously. So we don't have to work for months and years to forgive.
Which can sound daunting, obviously.
Sorry?
Which can sound daunting,
Which
right?
can sound
it's like,
daunting.
Oh, I have to do all this work.
We can do that right this moment. You can pick the person who's grieved you, hurt you, harmed you, abused you the most. And right here, right now, at this moment, in this studio, you can completely forgive and open your heart, and it will change the course of your life, guaranteed. You can do that. You have the ability to do that. And you also have the ability to be able to work on it, to be able to process it, to be able to look at it, to be able to examine it, to be able to go through all of the emotions, study those, cherish them, hate them, love them. You have the ability to do all those things. And at this particular moment in my life, I choose to experience life. I choose to have hard conversations with my wife. I choose to bang my head on the wall with challenges I confront in my business or in my personal life because I'm enamored with the life I'm living right now. I feel whole. I feel beautiful. So you're right in the sense that it's one of the possibilities, and it's probably a beautiful possibility to work on it as we would working out. I love working out. I love nurturing my body, my temple, my work of art, I call it. And there's a certain joy to doing that. So yeah, you know, these experiences that you're talking about, how do you transcend them? There's infinite
But it's not an
amounts
either
of
or.
ways. No, and there's everything in between that spectrum. Instantly, years in the making, could be weeks, could be months, could be whatever.
Yeah, that's great perspective. It's
And it could be never as well, right? It could be never. You may, so many people die, leave this plane of existence, and never solve that riddle that continued to resurface in their lives again and again.
Which can cause a lot of pain and trauma for people.
Yeah, it does.
It never
doesn't
goes
it?
away.
Yeah.
The piece that I've personally been really working on and have struggled in the past was the judgment of those feelings, and the language was, I shouldn't feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. And it was pure judgment versus saying, wow, like this sucks, or this is heavy, or whatever. This is beautiful. There was always judgment from me. And I think back to your point of probably some training with just society of saying, hey, we're just going to push this stuff off to the side, and changing the perspective. Not only that is as a probably trained in business to be a solutions focused person, the amount of times I'm trying to solve problems for my wife where she's like, shut up, listen, and just say, that sucks that you're feeling that. Like, I don't want an answer. I don't want a solution. Like, years of rewiring for me, but it's funny. And it's the topic that comes up over and over. And, it's something I'm working very, very hard at, but it's almost what is coming across as I'm trying to take those feelings away, not just for her, but for me. Because I don't like the feelings, and I'm trying to get rid of it. So it's this whole sort of pattern that I'm noticing, and putting the time and effort into that of just being okay with all of the feelings that are associated. But
I chuckle, Chris, because what you're talking about is so relatable to pretty much everybody who happens to be listening to this particular episode. And I also chuckle because I, as you know, I've got this book writing company. I'm coaching people how to write books. And there was an author who was writing a passage on the relationship she has with her husband, and her husband was attempting to fix something, and it was like, okay, how about this and how about that, and he was offering all the solutions he could possibly think of to fix the situation that was happening. And her comment, and I'm not quoting directly, but the sentiment was, can you just shut the fuck up and give me a hug? Can you just do that? Because that's all I need right now. That is all I need. And so earlier when we were talking about the language of emotion, the language of emotion is equally as powerful, and I would even say more powerful than the language of words. And so there you have it, that very relatable experience. So many of them can be solved using emotionality instead of trying to solve it through language and constructs and concepts. Let's just solve it. And one more thing on that topic, this idea of giving someone a hug and that's what's required at the moment leads me to something else that I wanted to mention today, because I think it's an important aspect of where we're going in society and where we're going to go in business in the future. And it's the idea of telepathy, the idea that we can communicate without language. And I remember being a youngster, and my mom, who was a student of New Age thought, said to me, Alex, your children will be able to communicate telepathically. And that always stuck with me. And while that hasn't come to fruition in the sense that I thought it would, like you and I having a conversation, no words, we're communicating, I am beginning to understand that telepathic communication happens all the time. We're just not aware of it. In fact, you and I are communicating telepathically right now. You can feel my heart, and I can feel your open heart as you ask the questions and receive and give, and I give and ask, and this interplay is happening, and there's a dynamic that's much more rich than the words that are actually coming out right now. And so my fervent belief is that we are entering into an era in which telepathy is going to be standard operating procedure. And I'll give you one quick example. I'm sure many of you can relate to this who are listening to this podcast episode. You're hanging out at night, the kids have gone to bed, I've got the music on in the kitchen with my wife, and we're immersed in a conversation about something. We're extremely present. There are no other distractions. And then instantly we say the same phrase at exactly the same time with exactly the same intonation, right? Anyone ever had that happen?
100%.
100%, right? I think so many people have. And so we diminish this reality that that can occur. And you're capable of doing that on command. And so I am now open to the concept that the richest form of communication happens at the emotional level, and it's telepathic. And I think that as we recognize that and accept that possibility, then I think there are implications that are really profound for the future of how we build business and for what businesses actually look like, because I think it's going to usher in an era of more truth, more honesty. And as a result, I think the whole face of business will change in the coming, I don't know, years, decades. I don't know what the time horizon is, but I see this happening, and it is happening.
I love it, and I mean, I'm a huge believer, and I live my life by energy transfer, right? And that's whether that's in between this conversation, in any relationship, and I mean that is what anything that you've created in your life started here, probably somewhere deeper, maybe at the heart level, that just becomes a reality. And I think we have an incredible ability as humans that a lot of people either aren't aware of or maybe don't appreciate the impact that we can have in that. So we could talk for hours about that, which would be, we'll do another time.
Sure.
Let's talk about the Working Writers Co., the company you co-founded to help others tell their story. And I mean, I'll start with the one thing that I think was probably one of your, I'll say, superpowers in this industry was, talking about like everyday, pretty basic products. I mean, it's apparel, mugs, writing instruments. It's some basic stuff. But you had this ability to take the thing that was on paper in a catalog or on a website, relatively basic, but it was storytelling that helped distributors like us then go, wow, I never looked at it that way, or never thought about it this way, or that's a great story that I can tell my clients so I can help them see the value in what we're doing here. Fast forward to your new company. What made you start this up?
All right, we're going to fast forward to that new company, but I'm going to rewind for 2 seconds.
Go.
And I'm going to acknowledge that, yes, storytelling has always been an ability of mine. And I would say that I used it deceptively a lot of the times, in the sense that if I was selling this mug right now, I'd have a story for you. And I would tell you why it's so unbelievable. And most of the time, it wouldn't even resonate in my heart, but I had the ability to be creative and invent a story. And some of those stories were manufactured, and I didn't tell people they were manufactured stories, and I didn't not tell people they were manufactured stories. In fact, a lot of people would say, like, did you make that one up? And I'd be like, yeah, I made it up. But
yes, I did.
But, you know, it's a possibility, you know, in how this mug is used. If it wasn't used by a cop in this situation, you could see it being used that way. And so it gives you an idea.
But is that any different than storytelling pre-books? Let's go back before computers, before the internet, before books. I mean, storytelling really is what made the world and, you know, brought cultures together or separated them. I mean, there was the art of creative.
Oh,
in that
for
too.
For sure. I mean, it's one of
I'm
the
not
reasons.
defending your deception.
Yeah,
but
no. And I
sometimes
get,
you need a good
that.
story to sell a white-handled mug.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
let's call a spade a spade. Shit, you just made that sound good. I could sell those now.
There's a lot more to that story, but that's a book unto itself.
Yes.
Okay, let's really answer your question about book writing and about stories. Yes, in fact, storytelling is part of the fabric of humanity, really. It's how we express ourselves. It's one of the ways in which we share. It's one of the ways in which we document things. And, you know, there's a tradition of mythology that, in my growing level of awareness, I've come to understand served a purpose to preserve information from the past that was so told in such a compelling way that it was able to survive cataclysms and different civilizations in different eras. So from that standpoint, yes, storytelling is super important.
Sure.
It is the ultimate, data repository, really. If you can create stories that resonate and vibrate, those stories will outlast civilizations, and they have. We still have stories from Egyptian times, from Mesopotamian times, from the indigenous people. We have stories that have been around since time immemorial. So yes, there's tremendous power in story, no question about it. And I think that must have been one of the things that drew me to the book writing business, is the idea of being able to harness my creativity, help people harness their creativity, and create works of art that have a vibration that transcend the moment and reach different audiences and create different things, right? We can create with our hands. We can take a hammer and a nail and we can build a house. We can also create monumental waves and incredible impact with words and stories, sentiment that washes through those words as well. And I'm still learning as I run this company. I'm still learning that art, and I'm relishing every day. And it's a new challenge for me, and it's exciting and invigorating. And I'm getting really good at what I do, and being able to pull and tease people's creativity and share stories that have tremendous impact. So I love what I do right now. It's just a gift to be able to help people.
Have you run into a situation with a client or a prospect where you just know there's so much more behind, but there's maybe that lack of vulnerability or that not wanting to go to the truth?
Yeah.
How do you get through that?
I think to a certain extent that happens with everybody who writes a book. And this is where different levels of awareness, the meeting of those two levels of awareness is so beautiful. So without question, you've got different levels of awareness than I do on certain topics, Chris. And so if we were to brainstorm corporate culture, you would bring to the table different ideas that I've never even contemplated. And so I am constantly pushing writers to explore areas that they haven't considered when my memory or my intuition is jogged by something they've written or something they say in conversation with me. So the answer to that question is yes. And I want to give you a really quick case study. Once upon a time, I had a writer who was referred to us, and he was thinking about writing a book with us. This was 1.5 years ago. And we had the call, and he said, I want to write this book. Here's the story, and I'm a happy-go-lucky dude, and I'll tell you a few things. And my partner said to him, yeah, nobody's going to read that story. And
it's great.
And it's counterintuitive because you're kind of pushing a customer away, aren't you? But the point of my story here, and I'm losing the thread of my own story only because I sense that I know we're on a time limit here, right? And I can already sense it, right? So, anyways, let's scrap that story. Suffice to say that I encounter that scenario all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it, I can imagine that you can create a great space for people to want to do that. And again, something that might take a little longer, but great questions, great interviews that can pull that out.
Yeah.
Knowing what you've done in multiple ventures, working for people, working on your own, what advice can you give to either someone that's thinking about starting a business or someone that's in the early stages, which can have all the emotional highs and lows on the week, on the day, on the hour?
Yeah.
What advice do you give to them?
To me, it's just so simple and it's so obvious. Operate from your heart. Always use that as the compass. Always use that as the guiding light. And tune into it as often as you can. And don't let the fire extinguish itself because of an external pressure or an external force. You're the only one who has the right to be able to move that fire to another location and embark on a new venture. And that's your right. That's something you can do. So my advice is follow that heart of yours and ignore all the commentary and all the chatter and accept what you feel is information that's going to help you achieve what it is that you want to achieve. So it really emanates from the heart for me.
I love that. I think I'm torn. If I'm seeing more of a heart-led business world, I think there's more of an expectation from a demographic that's younger than us for clarity, vulnerability, and like a true a mission, not just a corporate vessel to accumulate. And I think just the point I was going to say, which I love, I think I throw a lot of people off, but like I'm a big time hugger. I mean, my family is, it's just what I get from, but I will hug like man or woman, first meeting, like maybe it's a handshake to start, but I'm like, come on, bring it in.
Yeah.
And I think it makes some people uncomfortable. But my point would be, I just think there's more of this human element that's come into business, which I think is a beautiful thing and helps sort of take some of the walls down and say, hey, we're all in life looking for love, connection, freedom, whatever those things are. And I just think the world needs more of that right now.
I love that sentiment.
Alex, we could talk for hours. I appreciate you so much, and I thank you for again sharing great stories here today. Your story, your vulnerability. There's so much great impact there that we're able to get to the viewers and listeners. So thank you for all you do and for being a part of my life. I appreciate
You're welcome,
you.
Chris, and right back to you. Thank you for this opportunity and the space that you've created here with such a beautiful team. I'm looking at Cam and Gabe over here. Who are behind the scenes, and I've just met these two cats, and I can tell already I really appreciate you guys. What you're creating here is astounding, and this space that the three of you and Sam who's
and
in another office over
we got
there,
a great crew.
Is a sanctuary, is a sacred space, and in this sacred space, magic is happening. And the episodes that I've been able to tune into on your podcast are the evidence of that happening. So congratulations on creating this space. I'm excited and eager to see where it goes and how it evolves. I see you and your team as leaders, and I think that you have so much to give and so much to share, and I'm excited with what that's going to do to the world, because I know it makes an impact. I know that intuitively. I know that definitively. I know it from the bottom of my heart. So let's keep on creating magic, and thank you for this opportunity to share this space and this time with you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. That's so awesome. The last thing, most important, is how do we find you?
You can email me. It's alex@workingwritersco.com.
Okay. We'll get that in show notes.
alex@workingwritersco.com is my email address. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the only social media channel that I use with somewhat regularity.
Yeah.
So you might be able to find me there.
And the
on
last
LinkedIn.
plug I will say, which again, so much value in the that's now up and going again, is the Almost Enlightened podcast you have. So again, just on you're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I assume, to be able to track you down there. It's I got a ton of value. I shared with a lot of people, and I'm excited that you're getting launched, up and going again. We'll say.
Can I just thank you for that? You know, it's the Almost Enlightened podcast is. It's a child of mine. I love it equally as much as I love the loves of my life. And to have started that podcast again is just a tremendous joy for me. And thank you for bringing that up. I haven't followed up on my last episode that just said I'm coming back.
Yeah, I was like, shit,
but
let's go.
But
Come
I
on.
plan on it, and I've learned so much since my previous episodes, and so I'm really excited to see where that podcast goes. Thank you for bringing that
You'll
up.
have a lot to give to the world, so keep doing that.
Thank you.
All right, man.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, guys.